This tutorial is a project of nonprofitaccountingbasics.org, a free resource developed by the Greater Washington Society of CPAs Educational Foundation. Our goal is to encourage accuracy and accountability to help smaller nonprofits successfully manage and sustain their organizations.
I'm Patty O'Malley with Rubino & Company, and this session we're going to talk about applying for exemption from tax from the Internal Revenue Service. We'll start by talking about Form 1023, which is the application for exemption for those organizations that would like to be 501c3 organizations, and those would be charities and private foundations. Now, there are some exceptions to the need to file, such as churches, integrated auxiliaries of churches, and organizations that normally have less than $5,000 in gross receipts a year. You want to check the instructions for the form or your tax advisor to make sure that you would fit into one of these exceptions before you get started. I would tell you that in some cases, even though you have an exception to filing the Form 1023, you may want to do so anyway if you need a determination letter that recognizes your exemption that you can give to other organizations, such as funders. The Form 1023 is a very large form, and it's used not just to determine whether you can be exempt from tax. The IRS makes that determination, but they also use it as an educational tool so that you'll know what is required of you and what types of activities are all right for you to pursue and which aren't. The form starts asking questions about the organization of your entity. And they have several questions about the Articles of Incorporation. First, they want to make sure that you have an appropriate purpose noted within the Articles of Incorporation. You have to be organized for religious, educational, scientific, those types of purposes. You also need to have appropriate wording in a dissolution clause. Now, I know it's hard to think about dissolution when you're first starting, but there is a requirement that your assets be given to another charity, so that wording has to be within the Articles of Incorporation. They also want to see your bylaws, how you're going to be structured, how your governance is structured, and how the organization will be run. And finally, they're very interested in conflict of interest policies. I don't know that this is a requirement, but the IRS thinks it's so important that they've given you a sample within the instructions. So you can use that or use your own format, but you should consider having that in your submission. The narrative of activities, you have a specific mission. You've told the IRS, I want to be exempt to pursue a certain type of activity, whether it's taking care of animals or the environment. And you should have activities that you are doing or planning to do so that you can reach those objectives. And this is where you give the information about that, how you're going to go about it. If you have any brochures that you've developed, you may want to submit those so that the IRS can see what your plans are. There's a lot of information about compensation and financial arrangements for officers, directors, trustees, employees, and independent contractors. A financial arrangement can be something like a board member having additional space in their office that they want to lease to you, hopefully at a reduced rate, but you're paying that person, and the IRS wants to know that it's someone with significant influence is receiving funds from the organization. They also want to know if there are relationships between the people in these positions, and these relationships can be family. I've seen a lot of boards where a father and a daughter are on the same board, but it can also be business relationships. And so you want to be very forthright within your disclosure of these activities. Some organizations that are charities have membership. They ask for a little bit of information about that. They also want to know about your history. Some organizations are successor organizations, and they want to know how that process took place. Finally, there are questions about specific activities, and you may end up providing a narrative or an explanation within the form for these. But no substantial part of your activities can be lobbying, and so they want to make sure if you're lobbying that you know that. They talk about grants and loans to individuals and foreign activities. So as you go through, you just answer the question and provide what explanations are necessary. Your public charity status, you're going to be a charity or a private foundation, but even within the charities there are several code sections under which you can become exempt. And so this is the area where you will choose that and the one that will be best for your organization. Again, it would be a good idea to talk to an expert to make sure that you've selected the right format. There's 3 years worth of financial information. If you've been active or in existence for 3 years, you'd give actual data. If you're projecting because you've just started, it will still be the 3 years. And you need to do the best job you can and be realistic about what you think you're going to accomplish there. There are additional schedules for specific types of organizations, such as churches and supporting organizations, and you only fill those out if they apply to you. The filing fee, or they call it a user fee so that you'll know how much this costs for smaller organizations, and that's those with gross receipts that did not exceed $10,000 or over the last 4 years will be $400, and it's $850 for organizations above that amount. There's a brand new form. It just came out this past summer in June of 2014. It's called the 1023EZ, and it's a streamlined application for very small organizations. At the time that this form became available, the IRS had approximately 60,000 applications for exemption that were being processed or had been submitted, and they hadn't gotten to them yet. And so they developed this for the smallest organizations because many of the organizations that apply for exemption are indeed smaller. In this case, the definition is gross receipts should be $50,000 or less for each of the prior 3 years or as projected for the next 3. So if you're planning to grow and you're going to exceed that $50,000 in the 3rd year of your existence, let's say $100,000, you should be looking at filing the full Form 1023. Now, having said that, there are a lot of organizations that won't be eligible for this even though they're small. And the way to find out if you are eligible is to go to the instructions for the Form 1023EZ to the very back and look at the checklist. If any of those answers is yes, you're going to have to fill in a full Form 1023. And it's best to do that right at the beginning so that you don't waste any of your time. This form has to be filed electronically. You do not have the option of filing a paper form. And the way to do that is to go to pay.gov, and you have to register for an account. And once you do that, type 1023EZ in the search box, and you'll get the input area for doing this. Now, the other thing I'll let you know is that if you do go to the IRS website, which is irs.gov, they have a section for forms and publications, and if you click through and put 1023EZ in the search box, there is an area there where you can bring up the what the form would actually look like. It's a PDF, and maybe you would want to print that out as you're preparing the form before you do the input, so that you're sure that you have everything that you need. The user fee for this is $400. And finally, I want to talk about the Form 1024. This is the application for recognition for exemption under 501A, and it's pretty much for exempt groups other than 501c3. So a 501c5, which is a labor union, or a 501c6, which is a business league or trade association, would use this form in lieu of the 1023 if it applies to them. The form has not been updated since 1998, so it has not gotten as much attention as the Form 1023. It asks a lot of the same types of information. It wants to know about your activities, your sources of revenue, if you're a membership organization, who your members will be, financial information. And after each question, they have an area for you to give a narrative or an explanation for what you're doing. There are separate schedules for different types of organizations that are exempt. There are a whole list of them, and you only fill in what applies to you. The user fees here are the same as for the full Form 1023, and for both you're going to use Form 8718 for the filing. And well, thank you for your attention.